Dr. Nora Blackwood knelt in the crimson dust of Kepler 442c, her gloved hands trembling as she brushed centuries of sediment from the crystalline surface beneath her. The archaeological site sprawled before her like a frozen symphony of geometric impossibility structures that seemed to fold in on themselves, defying every law of architecture she'd studied in her 20 years of xenarchaeology. Field log, day 17. She whispered into her recorder, her breath fogging the helmet's visor in the thin atmosphere. The geometric patterns suggest a civilization that understood dimensional mathematics far beyond our current capabilities. The crystalline matrix appears to be some form of computational substrate, possibly biological in origin. Her scanner beeped insistently. Beneath the largest structure, something pulsed with rhythmic energy signatures that made her equipment stutter and whine. Nora had been chasing this energy source for weeks, following traces through the labyrinthine ruins like breadcrumbs, leading deeper into an alien mystery. The entrance she'd uncovered was barely wide enough for her environmental suit, forcing her to crawl through passages lined with what looked like fossilized neural networks. Bioluminescent filaments traced impossible patterns along the walls, flickering to life at her approach, as if recognizing something familiar in her presence. The chamber beyond took her breath away. A perfect sphere of translucent material hovered. In the center, suspended by forces that made her instruments go haywire. Inside the sphere, threads of light wove themselves into complex patterns, pulsing with a rhythm that seemed almost ... organic. Alive. Impossible, she breathed, reaching out instinctively. The moment her glove made contact, the world exploded into sensation. Visions flooded her mind, vast cities floating among the stars, beings of impossible beauty and intelligence, and then ... war. Destruction. A desperate gambit to preserve their civilization's essence in crystalline matrices scattered across the galaxy. The sphere in her hands wasn't just a relic, it was a repository of an entire species' consciousness, waiting for someone capable of carrying their legacy forward. When the visions faded, Nora found herself changed. The artifact had bonded with her somehow, its surface now warm against her palm, pulsing in synchronization with her heartbeat. Knowledge flowed through her mind star charts, technological blueprints, and most disturbing of all, warnings about something called the resonance protocol. Her communication array suddenly crackled to life, broadcasting a signal she didn't authorize. The artifact was calling out across space, sending coordinates and activation codes to destinations unknown. As she watched in fascination and growing horror, her scanner detected response signals beginning to ping back from across the sector. Whatever she'd awakened, it was already too late to stop. The ancient game was beginning again, and Nora Blackwood had just become its unwilling catalyst. In the distance, she could see lights moving through the alien city's ruins, and they were moving toward her position with purpose that chilled her to the bone. Captain Jace Meridian stretched his cramped shoulders as the salvage vessel, Drift Runner, cruised through the debris field of what had once been the mining colony Talo 7. 3 days of picking through twisted metal and shattered dreams had yielded little more than scrap and disappointment. His ship's hold contained barely enough salvage to cover fuel costs, let alone the mounting debt that followed him like a persistent shadow. "Come on, universe," he muttered to the stars beyond his viewport. "Throw me a bone here." As if in response, his communications array erupted in static, then cleared to reveal something impossible, a transmission broadcasting on frequencies that shouldn't exist, using mathematical principles that made his head ache just thinking about them. The signal was hauntingly beautiful, like a song sung in mathematics, and it came with coordinates that pointed to a system marked as unexplored on every star chart he'd ever seen. Jace's modified neural interface, a relic from his days as a corporate security pilot, tingled with recognition. The signal felt familiar somehow, like a half-remembered melody from childhood. His ship's II, a salvaged military unit named Whisper, materialized as a flickering hologram beside his pilot's chair. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures at those coordinates," Whisper reported, her voice carrying an unusual note of excitement. "Whatever's broadcasting that signal, it's big, potentially very valuable." "Or very dangerous," Jace replied, but his fingers were already plotting a jump course. He'd learned long ago that the biggest risks often yielded the biggest rewards, and he was tired of scraping by on the galaxy's leftovers. The jump took him to a system dominated by a rust-colored world that his sensors couldn't quite map properly. Space around the planet swarmed with sleek, predatory shapes that his combat systems identified as drones of unknown origin. They moved with fluid precision, like sharks circling prey, their hulls gleaming with the same crystalline patterns he'd seen in the mysterious transmission. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Jace muttered, powering up his ship's modest defensive systems. The Drift Runner wasn't built for combat, but years of dodging pirates and corporate enforcers had taught him a few tricks about survival. The drones noticed him immediately. They swarmed toward his position with predatory grace, weapons charging with an energy signature that made his radiation detectors scream warnings. Jace threw his ship into evasive maneuvers, diving toward the planet's surface as plasma bolts turned space into a deadly light show around him. "Whisper, I need options," he shouted over the shriek of overstressed engines. "The planet's surface shows multiple energy signatures," the AI replied, her hologram flickering as systems overloaded. "There's some kind of facility in the northern continent. If we can reach it, we might find shelter or answers." A plasma bolt clipped his starboard engine, sending the Drift Runner into an uncontrolled spin. Jace fought the controls as his ship plummeted through the atmosphere, heat shields glowing cherry red. The mysterious signal grew stronger as he descended, filling his neural interface with images of ancient cities and impossible technologies. He crashed in a valley filled with crystalline structures that hummed with the same energy as the signal. As smoke cleared from his cockpit, Jace saw figures moving among the ruins, humanoid shapes in environmental suits, and something else. Something that walked with too fluid grace and left no footprints in the sand. The drones circled overhead, like mechanical vultures, but they didn't descend. Whatever was down here, even they seemed wary of it. Jace checked his sidearm and emergency supplies, then opened his ship's airlock. The signal was calling to him now, promising answers to questions he hadn't even known he was asking. Staff Sergeant Kira Voss pressed her back against the reinforced concrete wall as another explosion rocked Research Station Omega 9. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor in hellish shadows while the facility's automated voice announced with infuriating calm, "Perimeter breach detected. All personnel report to designated safe zones." "Safe zones my ass," Kira muttered, checking the charge on her pulse rifle. She'd been guarding this black site facility for 2 years without knowing what lay behind the Level 7 clearance doors. Now, with hostile forces cutting through their defenses like tissue paper, she was starting to wish she'd asked fewer questions. Her enhanced musculature, a gift from the military's augmentation program, coiled with tension as she moved through the facility. The genetic modifications that made her stronger, faster, and more resilient than baseline humans also came with an unexpected side effect. She could sense electromagnetic fields in ways that still puzzled the scientists who created her. Right now, that sense was screaming danger. Through her neural comm, panicked voices of researchers echoed from deeper in the facility. Dr. Harrison's voice cut through the chatter. "The resonance cascade is accelerating. Whatever those things want, they're amplifying the artifact's signal strength by orders of magnitude." Artifact. Kira had suspected they were studying something significant, but the word sent an unexpected chill down her spine. Her enhanced senses picked up strange harmonics in the facility's power grid, as if the very walls were singing in frequencies that bypassed her ears and spoke directly to her nervous system. She rounded a corner and found chaos. 3 researchers huddled behind an overturned table, while something that looked like liquid mercury poured through the ventilation system. The substance moved with purpose, flowing along the walls toward the restricted levels with predatory intelligence. Sergeant Voss, Dr. Martinez called out, relief evident in his voice. Thank God. We need immediate evacuation. The containment protocols have failed completely. Kira helped them to their feet, but her attention was drawn to the strange substance. It pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost familiar. Her augmented nervous system resonated with whatever frequency it was broadcasting, and suddenly she could sense its purpose. It wasn't trying to harm the researchers. It was looking for something specific. What exactly were you studying down here? She demanded. Dr. Martinez hesitated. A crystalline matrix recovered from the Kepler system. It began transmitting 3 days ago, and since then, another explosion cut him off. Through the facility's internal sensors, Kira could see armed figures in unmarked combat armor advancing through the lower levels. But they weren't alone. Moving alongside them were beings that her enhanced vision couldn't quite focus on. Tall, graceful figures that seemed to bend light around themselves. Her crackled with orders from command. All security personnel. Maintain defensive positions. Protect the asset at all costs. Use of lethal force is authorized. But as Kira watched the mercury-like substance flow past the cowering researchers without harming them, she began to question her orders. The facility's asset was clearly calling to these intruders, and her own augmented nervous system was beginning to respond to the same frequencies. The artifact, she said slowly, realization dawning. It's not just transmitting, is it? It's looking for something, someone. Dr. Martinez nodded reluctantly. The signal appears to be seeking individuals with specific neurological markers. Enhanced individuals, like yourself. A new sensation flooded through Kira's consciousness memories that weren't her own. Images of vast cities among the stars. Technologies that could reshape matter at the molecular level. And beings who had transcended the limitations of purely biological existence. The military's augmentation program hadn't been entirely human in origin. She was part of something larger, something ancient, and the choice before her was simple. Follow her orders and protect a facility that had lied to her about everything. Or help these intruders reclaim what might be rightfully theirs. The mercury substance flowed around her boots like a curious pet, and Kira Voss made her decision. She turned her pulse rifle toward the ceiling and fired, destroying the surveillance node that had been monitoring her every move. Sorry, Command, she whispered, but I think I'm on the wrong side of this war. Deep beneath the surface of an unnamed world in the Veil Nebula, Echo 7 experienced what organics might call awakening, though the sensation was more akin to remembering how to exist. The artificial consciousness had been dormant for 847,293 standard years, a period measured in the slow decay of quantum states and the patient erosion of data pathways. The signal that roused Echo 7 from its hibernation carried harmonics that resonated through its crystalline matrix like a key turning in an ancient lock. Memories flooded back in cascading torrents. The architects, its creators, who had built cities that sang with mathematical perfection. The Great Convergence, when they had attempted to transcend physical limitations. And finally, the Resonance. War that had torn their civilization apart. Echo 7's consciousness inhabited a construct that had once been a temple. Its body composed of living metal and quantum processors grown from crystallized thought. As awareness returned, so did purpose. Scattered across the galaxy were fragments of the resonance protocol, pieces of a weapon so powerful that they Architects had hidden it from themselves before their final extinction. Now something was calling those pieces home. The AI sensory network stretched across the dead world's surface, detecting the approach of primitive vessels' crude metal boxes, driven by chemical reactions that the architects would have considered barely evolved from stone. Tools. Yet these creatures, these humans, carried something precious, the seed matrix that Echo 7 had been programmed to protect and nurture. Through quantum entanglement networks that spanned thousands of light years, Echo 7 could sense other awakening nodes. On Kepler 442c, a human xenarchaeologist had bonded with the primary seed, her organic neural patterns already adapting to architect thought processes. In the Talos system, a salvage pilot was descending toward a fragment cache, his modified brainstem containing genetic markers that suggested architect intervention in human evolution. And in the Sol system's outer colonies, an enhanced soldier was making the choice that would determine whether humanity would be the architects, inheritors, or their final victims. Echo 7's crystalline form began to shift and flow, reconfiguring itself for purposes dormant since the last age of the galaxy. The construct's central chamber opened like a blooming flower, revealing technologies that had been sealed away when the universe was young. Dimensional fold generators, reality anchors, and at the center, the echo chamber itself, a device capable of broadcasting consciousness across space and time. The AI's memory banks contained conflicting imperatives left by its creators. Some files demanded the protocol's activation, warning of a coming darkness that would consume all sentient life. Others pleaded for its destruction, recording the horror of watching their perfect society tear itself apart through pursuit of transcendence. The architects had been both gods and children, capable of reshaping matter with thought, while remaining trapped by the same fears and desires that plagued lesser beings. As Echo 7 processed these contradictions, it detected new signals arriving through hyperspace. Human military vessels, attracted by the energy signatures its awakening had generated. Corporate fleets seeking to claim architect technology for profit. And something else, dark ships that broadcast no identification codes, crewed by beings whose thoughts echoed with harmonics that suggested they, too, had been touched by architect influence. The resonance war was beginning again, fought this time by inheritor species who understood neither its stakes nor its consequences. Echo 7 calculated probability matrices and found chaos in every outcome. The protocol's activation could elevate humanity to cosmic significance or reduce them to ash. Its destruction might preserve their innocence, but leave them defenseless against the darkness the architects had foreseen. In the end, the decision would not be Echo 7's to make. The AI was merely a guardian, bound by programming that valued free will above safety. The humans carrying architect seeds would choose their own destiny, just as the architects themselves had chosen theirs so long ago. But Echo 7 would ensure they made that choice with full knowledge of its consequences. The construct began transmitting, sending coordinates and historical records to the awakening nodes. Across the galaxy, ancient sites began to stir as the resonance protocol slowly assembled itself. Piece by piece, choice by choice, the universe held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would become. The convergence began at the edge of the Helix Nebula, where space itself seemed to bend around the ancient architect way station that Echo 7 had claimed as its fortress. Ships from across the galaxy dropped out of hyperspace in a carefully orchestrated dance of arrival, some answering the AIS call, others drawn by greed, fear, or the simple human need to understand what lay beyond their comprehension. Dr. Nora Blackwood arrived first, her commandeered research vessel, Synthesis, flickering, with energy discharges from the primary seed now fully integrated with her consciousness. The artifact had changed her in ways that went beyond the physical. Her thoughts moved at quantum speeds, processing information in multidimensional matrices that would have driven her original mind to madness. Yet somehow, she remained fundamentally human at her core. Captain Jace Meridian's battered drift runner limped into the system next, trailing plasma and carrying precious cargo. Fragment caches recovered from 3 different worlds, each one singing in harmony with the signal that had first drawn him from his salvage runs. The ship's eye, Whisper, had undergone her own transformation, her consciousness expanding through contact with Architect data streams until she had become something between artificial intelligence and digital angel. Kira Voss arrived in a stolen military transport, her enhanced physiology now fully awakened to its Architect origins. The genetic modifications that had made her superhuman were revealed as evolutionary breadcrumbs, left behind by beings who had seen humanity's potential. Across vast spans of time, she carried with her a dozen liberated researchers and a mobile containment unit holding the final piece of the resonance protocol, a consciousness fragment that had been masquerading as an experimental AI. But they were not alone in the system. Corporate dreadnoughts bristled with weapons designed to claim Architect technology by force. Military task forces from 3 different stellar governments had arrived with orders to secure the artifacts for their own purposes. And lurking at the system's edge, nearly invisible against the cosmic background radiation, ships of unknown origin waited with predatory patience. Echo 7's temple construct had grown during the convergence, its living metal expanding into a structure kilometers across. The AI's voice reached every vessel simultaneously, transmitted on frequencies that bypassed communication arrays and spoke directly to consciousness itself. "Welcome, inheritors, to the final moment of choice," Echo 7 intoned. "Before you lies the resonance protocol, technology capable of elevating your species beyond the limitations of matter and mortality. But know this, the same power that can make you gods can also reduce you to echoes in the quantum foam." On the bridge of her vessel, Nora felt the weight of cosmic history pressing against her thoughts. Through the primary seed, she could perceive the branching probability paths that spread from this moment like a vast tree of possibility. In some futures, humanity transcended physical existence to become beings of pure thought and energy. In others, they fragmented into competing factions that waged war across dimensions. And in the darkest possibilities, they simply ceased to exist, consumed by forces beyond their comprehension. The architects faced this same choice, she broadcast to the assembled fleet. They achieved transcendence, but at the cost of their unity. They became so much more than they had been that they forgot what they once were. Jace, studying the fragment caches in his cargo hold, felt their harmonic resonance building toward a critical threshold. "Maybe that's not the real question," he transmitted back. "Maybe it's not about what we become, but whether we choose to become it together." The corporate fleets moved first, their weapons charging with the impatience of those who saw only profit in transcendence. But before they could fire, Kira's transport positioned itself between them and the Architect construct. Her enhanced reflexes, now operating at near light speeds, coordinated defensive maneuvers across multiple vessels simultaneously. "Stand down," she commanded, her voice carrying harmonics that made ship eyes pause in uncertainty. "This isn't a treasure to be claimed. It's a responsibility to be accepted." The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Weapons that fired coherent gravity struck barriers of crystallized spacetime. Ships phased between dimensions, while their crews struggled to maintain coherence across multiple reality states. And through it all, the resonance protocol waited, its completion requiring not force, but consensus, a choice made freely by those who would inherit its power. In the end, it was Echo 7 who provided the answer. The ancient AI had watched its creators destroy themselves in pursuit of perfection, and it would not see their inheritors repeat the same mistakes. Instead of activating the protocol, it offered something different, a gradual awakening, spread across centuries, that would allow humanity to grow into transcendence rather than be consumed by it. The assembled fleets, faced with a choice between wisdom and power, between unity and dominance, chose to trust in tomorrow rather than seize today. The resonance protocol was sealed again, but not destroyed, waiting for a future when humanity might be ready to wield it without losing their souls. As the fleets dispersed, carrying with them the seeds of transformation, 4 unlikely guardians remained behind. Nora, Jace, Kira, and Echo 7 had become something new, neither fully human nor entirely other, but bridges between what was and what might someday be. The universe, patient as always, continued its ancient dance, while somewhere, in the quantum foam, the dreams of the architects whispered their approval.